Right. So listeners should know, I mean, this is worth talking about because it's actually really funny. At 2:00, I left for Rek-lis. So this is the Rek-lis 100K celebration day, and you actually referenced it, Mike, during your comedy monologue about me not taking calls. You'd never forgive me and this and that. So wouldn't you know it, the second I leave for the show, like within 5 minutes, 2 calls come in, and then there's a third. It was just, head-slapping moment. Like, are you kidding me? But it's...
You missed all the action stuff.
Yeah, it was like FOMO for sure, but it for me, it reinforced the fact that we are all volunteers and we cannot do this 100% of the time. You do what you can and you help out as much as you can, and everybody is appreciated for it, and everybody deserves a day off. I mean, I think it's important for rescuers and EMT people and, first responders to have that outlet or whatever, your hobby, just to be healthy and normal. And, you cannot live this stuff 24/7. It'll kill you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then just moving on, like the third one that you were talking about on September 11th, Fish and Game received a 911 call at 2:00. There was an injured hiker on the Gorge Brook Trail on Mount Moosilauke in Benton. From now on, when I talk about Moosilauke, I'm gonna switch it up and say Moosilauke and then Moosilauke. So that way I can't get any garbage from anyone because I say it both ways.
Clever.
Broadcasting from the Woodpeckers studio in the great state of New Hampshire, welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast, where we discuss all things related to hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Here are your hosts, Mike and Stump.
And I'm live, Stump.
Hey, you're back.
Episode 75. I'm back. Where you been?
I've been hiding. Just so damn busy, man. Last few weeks were nuts, right?
They were. I'm still I needed a week to recover from the anxiety of like a live show.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Same here. I think it worked out pretty well. I'm actually having my little sweaty hands and a little thumb drive full of video that folks captured. So once I have some time, I'm going to see if I can't marry that audio to that video. It might be interesting. I'm not sure if it would work because I did edit that audio just a little bit here and there, but not much.
Yeah, give it a shot. See if you can pull some clips. We'll share with the audience.
Yeah, that's a good call, actually. But it was a great time, for sure. I want to thank everybody again for coming out. We're back in the saddle again, and I was really pleased with that. And you did a great job too, Mike. I mean, the stand-up comedy routine was hilarious, actually.
Yeah, the goal was to be so bad that it was funny, so I don't know.
It worked. Just the way you finished it off too, like, this is how it felt exactly at that comedy club.
I do, really good. Yeah, I remember like watching some of the comedians spawn. Like, so I worked at this place called Giggles Comedy Club for like 10 years, and it was owned by, if you know Lenny Clark, like
sure.
Lenny Clark's brother Mike Clark. So Lenny Clark was in Something About Mary. He was like one of the firefighters with Steve Sweeney in the scene where he zips his pants into his nether regions, and they have to pull him out of so that's Lenny Clark. So they would get good comedians in there, like Joe Rogan was in there, and they had like a bunch of people. But people would test things out, and sometimes you'd catch a set, and the comedians would absolutely just bomb. And
it's a hard,
so I know talent. What that feels like.
Oh yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of skill. It's I really appreciate it, especially listening to Rogan. He talks quite a bit about his bits and how it works and the whole process. It's very, very awesome.
Yeah, almost have to like memorize. Like I was reading everything off a script, which is what I do. I couldn't memorize that off the top of my head, but like just getting the cadence down on stand-up comedy, I don't know how they do it. But anyway, I tried.
Yeah,
but I think live shows, I'm good to do that maybe once a year, but the anxiety level is just through the roof for me.
Oh, yeah. I think now that we've done it, I think, there's no reason to do it again unless there was some amazing reason to. But, I mean, 100K was certainly memorable. But, yeah. Let's just get back to doing the old standard shows and have a good time.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, everybody. So happy fall. So the fall is coming. It's getting colder out at night. Anything you want to talk about in relation to the fall? I know we're going to cover something deeper later, but any initial thoughts?
Well, I mean, it may be an earlier winter season than expected. I mean, you already have rime ice and snow popping up on Mount Washington. And we've had several nights up here. We had to bring the plants in already because we're hitting the low 30s, and we haven't had a frost yet, so that's a good thing. But yeah, it's changing quick. It's amazing how it changes so fast come Labor Day.
Yeah. Do you know? Like, I don't have any basis for knowing this, but like I hear people say this, and they're like, "Well, it was a dry summer, so that means that we're going to have like less color and it's going to be coming earlier." Like, I don't know. Like, what is
talking to somebody?
What is
about
moisture
that.
level? What is that? Do you know anything about that? I don't know anything about it.
It's something to that effect. Last year, if I remember correctly, was sort of dull, and I honestly can't remember. And on the way home today, I was talking to my friend saying, "Do you recall what it is?" I'm honestly at a loss. I don't quite remember either. It was. I mean, we're getting color change now at the high summits above 2K, roughly. You're starting to see change. And to me, it looks a little flat. And I don't know if we've had a significant, I mean, it was a hot, dry summer. But it may have, this rain that we've had lately may be a little too late to save the day.
Yeah, I think it matters too. Like when you get into a trail and you're like in the trees and you find one of those trails that has like a nice straight, like a 500-foot like straight section, and you can see down, kind of like when we were walking down Livermore and you've got that sort of straight view. Like that to me is always the coolest way to look at foliage, is like you're completely immersed in it and you're like a tunnel. Mm-hmm. So I almost like having it look dull from being up on a peak is one thing, but I think when you're inside there, regardless of like whether or not it's a dull season or not, like you can still really get that feeling of foliage, and I like that. I like being immersed in it instead of like just looking at it from above.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing you have to consider, the leaves falling and slippery trails, so that's coming soon. We're on the cusp of Columbus Day weekend too, which is the big leaf peeper season. So just be careful out there. I'm definitely ready to put all my winter stuff in my truck, except for the snowshoes, obviously. But for the clothing, it's definitely time. And one last thing here. I'm looking at our previous episodes, and I see episode 42 was snowshoes. I can't find our... episode 32 and episode 33 were the intro to winter. So if you guys want to check that out again, I think those are really informative, just getting ready for what's coming our way soon.
Yeah, and we're going to do a rehash of like winter hiking too. So
Sure.
we'll probably pick the best and maybe see if Rebecca or Karen wants to come back on. It's been a while.
Hey, this isn't on the script, but I remember you recently covered the whole GPS thing. Not GPS, but the service that's coming through the phones, the Androids. Mm-hmm. Did you hear about Starlink and T-Mobile hooking up recently?
Yeah, that was actually part of the show. I covered that on the show a little bit towards the end. So there's a couple of satellite providers, and it looks like so Apple is connected with another satellite company to do this emergency SOS, where there's no cell connectivity, and then T-Mobile is partnering with Starlink to provide Wi-Fi where there's dead zone. So it sounds like the T-Mobile offering will be a little bit more comprehensive and
for
probably
texting.
a better service for for people overall. But the thing I don't know about is Starlink has a capacity issue in their specific zone. So like there's certain areas where they won't sell satellite receivers because they've hit their limit on the regional capacity. So I don't know whether or not that matters. My understanding about T-Mobile is that with the new satellites being sent up, those are going to have new antenna technology that's going to be embedded into the T-Mobile phone. So I don't know if coverage for T-Mobile is going to match what currently exists for Starlink or whether they have to build that up in the future.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. It was definitely like emphasizing the fact that you'd be able to get text regardless. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Elon Musk had been interviewed, and he was like, we're talking with Apple as well around collaboration. So I think T-Mobile is probably the first. Eventually, my guess is that Starlink, once they get their network up and running completely, will likely be sort of like the third option. So you'll be like access to Wi-Fi from home, access to cell towers when you're out and about, and then when you're in rural areas, the next step will be satellite connectivity.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So it's a
Brave new
cool
world.
future we're looking for here, Stomp.
Yeah.
And next up here, we've got a write-up for Larson. So he got a little press on Go East. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. EMS interviewed him shortly after the Skyline fastest known time. And this was by Ryan Wilchins, who we had on as a guest, if I remember correctly. And that just talks about the whole experience, the ups and downs, and we will provide a link for sure so you can check it out. It's fairly brief, but it's still pretty cool. It's nice that they're giving some of these folks props for their accomplishments.
Go Larson.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then next we have New Hampshire Air National Guard has a new SAR team. What is this all about?
Isn't that great? So, the Black Hawk crew, Air National Guard, they're all volunteers, and they give their time extensively for missions and whatnot. But over the last, I think it was about the last year or so, they've been working on establishing their own boot level on the ground team to respond to missions down south, southern New Hampshire, more or less. So it's VSAR. It's Volunteer Search and Rescue. That's their name. So VSAR. And again, we'll give you the link, but there's a nice video that they've provided with Lieutenant Nealand, and it just goes into what they've been up to. Very cool. I from the training that we had on September 10th, I guess there was a funny moment. They were talking about the color of shirts that they were going to wear. You know how all these teams have different colors. Mm-hmm. So I guess they're leaning towards like a pink, which is cool because Lieutenant Nealand basically told them, "Oh, you guys can pull it off for sure."
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's nice.
That's good. And then. Yeah, I don't love the name. I feel like they should be SNH SAR.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, that's a long word though, SNH. I like VSAR.
Yeah, I guess. I'm just used to SNHU, so SNH SAR would be
sure.
It would flow.
I wonder if it's partly because they just don't want to have any notoriety and they want to distance themselves from anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. And then, Stomp, I see here in the notes we've got a new rock slide. Where is this?
Well, if you remember the two individuals that got fined recently for getting stuck up on the Hound's Hump of Eagle Crag, we were just up there last Friday night for a qualifying hike for some new members. And sure enough, I look over and there is a massive exfoliation, probably the size of, I don't know, a 60, 2 3-deckers stacked on top of each other that peeled off of the side of Eagle Cliff, essentially.
Really?
It stands out because you have the sort of the granite, and then it gets very bright and tannish where this slab peeled off. But what happened was it took out all the trees, straight down, in my opinion. I haven't gone in to explore, but straight down to approximately where Greenleaf Trail is. It's unbelievable.
So in
Boulder
relation
Field.
to the climber trail to get up to the Watcher,
Yep.
if you're looking at the eaglet right as you get to that climber trail, are you talking about the slide is off to the left?
Yes.
Or is it in? Okay.
It's off to the left. If you go
So
into
it's not easy to get to.
Easier than you think, because there are climber trails all over that area that go up there.
Okay.
And it's pretty frightening to think that we had members up there for that rescue, literally right there, standing in the vicinity of that area. So it really puts a little more context to the risk that some of the volunteers put themselves into, because that could have let at any time. But if anybody drives by, and Mike, if you're in the area, you got to see this. It's freaking massive. It's so massive.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I was when we were driving up to Rek-lis, I was like pointing out the Watcher to my wife.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh my God, I can totally see it." So you can't see it from the road. It's just
Sure.
not easy. You have to kind of know where to look.
Yeah, you can't miss this one. It's just huge.
Okay. All right, I'll check it out. So Pop Culture Talk Stomp, you've got a new show for me. What is this all about?
Well, it's not new. We talked about Love is Blind, where these single people go into, actually they're couples that separate, and then they go into this pod to talk to other people, and then they eventually see the other person after, X amount of days talking to them without seeing what they look like and everything else. But there's another variation up there now, and it's after the altar. So it's like a year later after the series ended just recently. So you might dig it. It's pretty crazy.
Wait a minute. Is this the show where they're in the dark, right? They talk to each other in complete darkness?
Nope. No, they're in like pods, and there's like a sheer blind in the way, so you can hear the person, but you can't see them.
Okay.
And it's sort of interesting, but you might want to check it out. We watched it just the other day. It was pretty good.
All right, yeah, I'll check it out. I'm busy with Cobra Kai. I'm watching The Karate Kid season 5.
Yeah.
Loving that, and I'm also busy with House of the Dragons, and I've kind of gone away from the Lord of the Rings thing. I've like put that.
Oh, you put it to bed.
I'll binge that at some point. I don't know what's happening. I'm very confused. But House of the Dragons, amazing.
Great.
We're through episode 5. We're getting ready to do the time jump.
I
Kristen
get that.
Cole and Rhaenyra have sort of like that arc is going to be critical into the future. But like there's everything's set up now. Now we got the time jump. And it's going to start getting crazy.
Yeah, great job so far. Really happy with it.
Queen Alicent has decided, like, okay, I'm going to fight this situation with Rhaenyra, and that's basically the key relationship is Alicent and Rhaenyra. So keep an eye out for that.
It's great. I love the casting. The King is fantastic. I love his acting in this, and of course, Matt Smith. They're all killing it. It's really great.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And Viserys, his sort of inability to take a stand and realize what's going on around him, and he's just sort of like hoping that like if he doesn't address problems, they'll just go away. Like they play it perfectly because that's how he's described in the books as well. Okay. It's just like the casting and the way that they've set this up in the first 5 episodes is amazing. So I'm hoping that they keep it going.
Yeah.
And there's really no way that they can mess up like they did Game of Thrones because all the source material is already written and it's super tight. So they just got to follow the source material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. Yep. Hey, you hear the news about Phantom closing?
I did actually.
If you read the article, it's more or less because of the money drop. People just aren't going to the theater as much anymore post-COVID. Yeah. So it's really a shame. I mean, how many shows did they do? Something like 13,000. Wait a minute. Oh, see, it's all over the place, but on Broadway alone, it was 13,000 shows to 19 million people. I got to see it. I don't know if you've ever seen it in New York.
I have not, and I never had any interest.
Yeah. I went along, not begrudgingly, but I wasn't like absolutely like obsessed with it, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good experience. So we had a lot of nice experiences with the kids in New York as they were growing up. But anywho, the curtain closes.
Yeah, that's good. I think we're going to see Hamilton. Yeah, I think Hamilton's coming to Boston, I think.
Yeah.
I think my wife got tickets for some of us. But my understanding is, Broadway's hurting. I think that like a lot of people have kind of stayed away. Honestly, like New York, I keep hearing all these stories about crime and all this stuff. I'm a little bit like, I don't know if I want to be going to New York at this point. But
no question.
My understanding is Lion King and Wicked are like the only two shows that are sort of holding up.
Yeah.
I think, or maybe it's just Lion King and another Disney show.
Wicked is probably doing okay. That's another decent show. But yeah, I'm not really sure. Who knows? But anyway.
Well, good luck, Broadway.
I did have a note here about Fortitude. Have you ever seen that series?
I have not.
Okay, just briefly, I talked Mr. Stomp into watching it. I'm a fanatic about it. It does have Richard Dormer, who was a cast member on Game of Thrones, and it's a really neat psychodrama / I don't know if anybody saw Leftovers, but Leftovers was very similar. But really recommended. You have all this crazy stuff going up on top, but underneath there's this dark thread that nobody realizes is happening. Sort of like Game of Thrones, like with the White Watchers and all that stuff. So anyway, Fortitude, it's super, super cool. Oh yeah, Dennis Quaid is in there too. So,
all right. What streaming service is it?
I have a couple of the DVDs myself, but you can find it on Amazon for rent, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Yeah, it's good stuff, though.
All right, so sponsors and coffee talk, Stomp. Keep it moving.
Yeah, let's see. We have Jeff K. and Emily M. donated 5 coffees, loving the beard. That's funny. Jeff, a.k.a. Full Strength Coffee, 5. Jeff went to the show, and thanks for coming, Jeff. I saw Jeff.
He did. Did I meet him?
He looks like Thanos. You know Thanos, the guy from like Marvel Comics or whatever?
Yeah. I think I met him then. Okay.
I don't mean offense to that, but he's like, you can't miss him. He's pretty cool looking dude out there. But he had a good time too. So Shandy donated 5. Thank you, Shandy. Paul donated 20 and just wished us congratulations. Stacy Tardif donated 5, and she mentioned that it was for your Gilmore Girls subscription.
Oh, nice.
You're right.
Thanks, Stacy. I appreciate that.
We have another congrats from Nick Sidla, and he donated 5, and then Shandy donated 3. And thank you for the Sage shout out. That's her dog.
Yes, the dog finished the 4,000 footers. Congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to shout out Spinner's Pizza in Andover off of Route 93. People are stopping in to support them. Family owned since 1994. Number 1 pizza in the area. And EMS, your Northeast go-to for outdoor gear, guidance, and education, and more since 1967. And a huge plug to @Rek-lis Brewing, who hosted the 100K show. They've got so much cooking there. I mean, word is out. They're killing it. 15 minutes from Franconia Notch and many 4K footers and less than 10 minutes from the 5 corners. So after your hike, go check them out.
Yeah, Rek-lis is awesome.
Yeah.
Like that back pint area was like so amazing.
Yes.
Like, I definitely recommend it to anybody that's up there. You got to get there.
Yeah, beautiful, right? Absolutely beautiful.
Amazing.
And
all right, Stomp.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to episode 75 of the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast. We are back to our normal format. So this week we're going to talk about the numbers. So we spent some time updating our tracking of search and rescue events for 2019, 2020, and 2021 so we can break down some trends and patterns. So everything you ever wanted to know about media reported search and rescue events, we'll break it down. So I'm going to run these by Stomp to get his impressions of trends in the search and rescue and the whites. Plus, we're going to go back in time to 1941, and we're going to talk about the case of Pamela Hollingworth, who, as a 5-year-old, went missing around Mount Chocorua for 8 days. And this triggered one of the largest search and rescue events in the history of New Hampshire. So we're going to dig into that a little bit too. So I'm Mike.
And I'm Stomp. Let's get started.
So beer talk, what do you got?
Nothing. I'm just having a little, like a cranberry vodka thing. There was nothing. I actually did have a really cool, I didn't know they made these, but they make a triple IPA. the Campton Cupboard is really upping their game, and I found a triple that was delicious. It's by that company that makes like Wizard and Metaphor. They're really cool looking cans, but I honestly can't remember the name of the damn brewery. But a triple. Did you know about triple IPAs?
I didn't know.
I mean, how high are they gonna go?
I can barely so I'm drinking a double IPA. So my brother-in-law I'm pulling from Rhode Island tonight. So I've got something from Gray Sail Brewing of Rhode Island called Captain's Daughter, and it's a double IPA. My lovely brother-in-law Tommy Twigs brought it up this weekend, so I'm trying to finish these off. But it's a double IPA. It's pretty stiff, but it's good.
Hey, nice, excellent.
Gray Sail Brewing.
Gray Sail.
Yeah, it's got a lady on the front of the ship.
Okay.
So this would be Corliss Valerian's of the House of Dragons' favorite beer.
Right.
Right. Cool. All right. Recent hike, Stomp? Anything?
Got nothing. I've been doing little just exercise jaunts, but last weekend I was spinning tracks for White Mountain Endurance. I got to see South Pond. I've never been there. That was beautiful. And I missed the North Country.
That place is pretty cool, huh?
It's beautiful, yeah. The whole area is just awesome. And, just driving by the Percy's, I mean, Mrs. Stump and I are planning to get up there soon before the weather gets really cold and whatever else. And they closed the road to Nash Stream because we want to do Percy again really bad. It's just so pretty up there. I almost took the right over the bridge at Stark to go see that prisoner of war camp, but it was getting a little late.
Yeah. With the Kilkenny race, did they the people that did the 25 miles, so only one direction, did they end at South Pond?
Yeah. Yep. They started, I know where they start, what time they started, but I'm not sure where they started.
I'm assuming they start by that golf course and they start go up Star King Trail.
I don't have the details on that, but I could tell you that 5 a.m. the 50 went first, and then at 7 the 25ers left. So that's how that worked out. And I got there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I got there at 1, the first winner of the 50 already came in, or the 25.
25.
Yeah.
They're going back the other direction.
Exactly, yeah.
So the 25, that's awesome then. So they finish, they can just hang out and swim in South Pond and just chill.
Yep.
So did you do any swimming there?
No, I was busy DJing. So I was just playing music from 1. I left around maybe, if I remember correctly, maybe 8-ish I left. So I was jamming out like all day long. It was fun.
I bet.
Good time.
Yeah. And just if you ever want to go for a good hike, like park in that South Pond parking lot, and then especially in the fall, like you can go just hang a right, go up Devil's Hop Yard, which is like just a spur trail. It's kind of like I didn't do that part of it, but I've heard it's like Mahoosic Notch or whatever, but not as impressive. But I think it's a rock scramble, and then head up to Rogers Ledge. That Rogers Ledge is like amazing. That's an awesome area.
So if you keep on going, does that take you to Unknown Pond?
Yeah, exactly. So if you left from South Pond, you would go up to Rogers Ledge, and then you go through this like really cool, like there's a mountain sort of pond area with a bunch of bog bridges, and then eventually you go through this section that has these super tall ferns, and then you come out to Unknown Pond, and then head up to the Horn and the Bulge and Cabot, and then through the Weeks and out to Womback and Star King. So it's an amazing area.
Yeah.
Kilkenny's all. I got to take you on the Traverse one of these days.
I would love it. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that as an overnight.
If I can carve out some time.
yeah, we'll see.
Like Nobby's going out this weekend, and I think I have to bail on him. But anywho.
Yeah, I gotta drive my daughter to work this weekend, so I'll be up in Maine on Friday, Saturday, I think, but I got to come back early, so I can't go. But for me, Stomp, I did do a hike. I got out early last Saturday morning, I think, and I got up around 3:30 in the morning, drove up to Edmonds Path. I scored big time. I knew I was going to have a good day because I always stop at the Hooksett rest area to get gas, and I'll usually grab a Snickers bar and a Gatorade on 93.
Yeah.
They have this rest area, and like almost every time I go there, they don't have the bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches. Like they have this like hot plate area, but every time I go there lately, like they're like, oh, we haven't. I got there one time at like 6:30, and they were like, oh, we haven't put them out yet. So I got to Hooksett at like 4:30 in the morning, and they had bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches available. So I was like, I know I'm in for a lucky day today. So I had an awesome day.
Yeah, it's a good meal.
Exactly. So Hooksett Toll, stop and get a bacon, egg, and cheese, a Snickers, and a Gatorade. You're good to go. But I got up to Edmonds Path, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning or something. I hit it up, and I hadn't done that like little section between Eisenhower and Monroe.
Okay.
On the AT, so I was like, I want to loop that and get that section because I'm trying to like cover the entire Appalachian Trail.
It's funny, I was trying to follow what you were doing, and you were sort of cryptic about it. I'm like, is he doing a Prezi? Like I had no idea what you were doing.
No, I just went up Edmonds, and then I was like, originally I had to get back early because we were going out on Saturday night, so I had to be back early. We were having people over actually, so I had to cook. So I got on trail around 6:30, headed up to the junction of Edmonds Path and Crawford Path, and then I was like, maybe I'll go to Eisenhower, but it'll depend on how the timing is. Took a left, and I just followed Crawford Path and went up to like Mount Franklin, and that like I've never been on that section, so it's like awesome because it's like this flat sort of tableland section when you go between Eisenhower and before you get to Monroe, and then I ended up doing the Monroe loop. So I went to Little Monroe, and then I cut over, went to Monroe, and then I realized I was like, oh crap, I need to like go down to Lake of the Clouds so I can loop around to get the rest of Crawford Path that I haven't done before. Yeah. Because I was doing like the red line and trace and stuff. So I went down to Lake of the Clouds, had a bathroom break there, and then headed back over, and then I was just chilling out on that section of like Mount Franklin and those little sub peaks, and I stopped and had like breakfast, which was a steak and cheese or a chicken parm sub actually, and I just took my time. But the weather was amazing, the views were amazing, and I was like, I got plenty of time. I got back to the junction, and I was like, do I do Eisenhower? And I looked up, there was like 10 people going up there, and I was like, I don't really want to deal with the crowd, so I just headed back down to Edmonds.
Gotcha.
And so I was heading down Edmonds around, I don't know, 10 o'clock in the morning or so, 10:30, and it was like absolute mob scene. Dozens and dozens of people.
Wow.
So I was pretty happy that I chose that.
Yeah.
I had 2 visitors on the way down, though.
Oh, really?
One, I met Jonathan, so shout out to Jonathan. He actually recognized me, so Jonathan's a listener, and he was like, are you Mike? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh my God, I listened to the show. He was telling me, he's like, oh, I just listened to the show on the way up. He comes from Boston. He's just starting to do his 4,000 footers, so we were kind of hanging out talking. I was like trying to dig through my pack to get him a sticker, but I left my sticker in my overnight backpack, so I didn't have any.
Oh,
so
that's
sorry,
funny.
Jonathan.
Oh, that's funny. Well, there you go. Was it the first one that's happened to you?
I mean, I've been recognized before for by other people, but like just people I know online. But I'd never really been recognized because of the podcast, which was cool. You know, it was nice. Jonathan was cool, good guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then on my way down too, I ran into Arlette. So Apple Pie, who we've talked about a bunch of times. Right. She just finished the 11 National Scenic Parks. So I was saying hi to her. I hadn't seen her in a while. We've hung out a couple of times. So she was actually guiding for Redline Guiding, and she had a lady who's super nice. She just wanted a hiking companion. So 80-year-old lady who Arlette was taking up to Eisenhower, and they got up top. I saw her on social media. Had an awesome day, and she was killing it. 80 years old.
Wow. Yep. See, Martin Pazzani nailed it. It's like it's the elixir of youth.
It is. So, but yeah, it was nice to see her. And I was like, I got to get you on the podcast. So she's like, October. She's like, I've been interviewing like constantly. And I was like, I get it. I didn't want to bother you yet, but give her a little bit of time. Yeah. You and I have to come up with a game plan for the next few months. You got to get some guests.
I know. It's like listeners have no idea. We're like winging this week to week.
Yeah, exactly. But we got some good stuff here. So want to skip the notable hikers and get into some history?
Yeah. I do want to just send a shout out to Run Cast Run because she took her students up Mount Pemmy, and that's super cool, getting kids out of the class and doing something outdoors like that. So nice job. And Full Strength Coffee, Vicky, Miss Von Jazz Hands, I see you, and thank you for tagging us. You really appreciated. But yeah, we got a long show, so we're going to move on.
Run Cass, Teacher of the Year.
That's right.
Along with our friend Karen. All right, so this is the part where you're going to do time for some White Mountain history.
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's dive into some White Mountains history, shall we?
All right, so we're going to go back to 1941, Stomp. How old were you in 1941?
1941, I was negative.
You were negative? Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I was definitely negative.
Okay.
1941?
1941.
You have what is this, a search or something, or?
Yeah, so this I wanted to cover the story of Pamela Hollingworth, who is a 5-year-old girl who was visiting New Hampshire. So they're family from Lowell, Lowell, Massachusetts, or Dunstable, which I guess is like pretty close to Lowell. So families from Lowell, father, mother, 5-year-old daughter, and then I think a slightly older brother. So they were heading up to New Hampshire. They were staying near White Ledge Campground, which is that campground where it's right past Mount Chocorua. If you're ever hiking like Carter Ledge Trail, you can get in from that direction there. There's a few spots in the campground.
Okay.
And then it's right next to this little pond called Iona Pond or Iona Lake.
Yeah.
So they were spending the day near the lake on the other side of the road from the campground. I guess the little girl and the brother were off exploring and doing their thing, and they'd come back earlier, went back out to mess around, and sure enough, like the brother, who, like older brothers tend to be, it was like an asshole, left his 5-year-old sister back, and she ended up wandering off and went missing. So just to set sort of the geography here, they're at the White Ledge campground area, very close to Route 16, sort of on the northern side of Mount Chocorua. And, the father is obviously frantic. He's leading a search crew. So this search ended up going 8 days. 8 days total.
It's amazing.
The weather was like, it was starting to get, it was freezing weather overnight.
Yeah.
So, low 30s into the 20s, all of the nights that she was missing. And the father was, he was actively involved in the search. Initially, he injured his shoulder, so he had to go into Conway, I think, with the mother to sort of get his shoulder fixed. But during that time, there was constant searching going on. So they set up a base camp around White Ledge. So this is 1941. So I don't know what the road situation is, but I'm assuming they had whatever the equivalent of Route 16 is. I don't even know if these roads were paved or whether they were like just, hard packed dirt roads. I really don't know the situation. I think that automobiles were pretty ubiquitous at that point, so it wasn't uncommon for people to have vehicles. But there was a pretty good crowd there. Initially, they were searching the bodies of water. So there's some brooks around there. There's a couple of small ponds. And, they were concerned that she might have fallen into the water, but there was really no signs. Bunch of witnesses came out and said, like, oh, I saw a girl sitting along the side of the road. I heard a girl yelling from the woods. There was a couple of, as there always is with these sort of uncontrolled searches, a couple of weird people that showed up that people started questioning, like, was this person involved? One guy, I think the third or fourth day, they were sort of like, they started interrogating him. There was some concerns that he had like an arrest record. They let him go, but with the understanding that he was supposed to show up the next day to be interviewed in more detail by the police. He didn't show up the next day, so that got everybody thinking like, okay, maybe this is a kidnapping situation. Eventually, that guy ended up in Boston. They arrested him. So there's a lot of sort of red herrings going on. All at the same time, they're conducting ground searches with like dozens and dozens of people. The state of New Hampshire offered a $500 reward for this girl, which is a lot of money back in in the days.
Oh, yeah, 1941.
Yeah, progressively. So as the search went on, 4 or 5 days into it, the temperatures overnight are hitting like 24 degrees or hitting 20 degrees. So they're thinking like, all right, this is a 5-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. She's been missing 5 or 6 days. The temperatures overnight have been below freezing. A couple of days it rained. They've got hundreds of searchers on there.
Wow.
They've already pivoted towards the idea of kidnapping. They've looked in the bodies of water in and around the area. They've hit a 4-mile radius around the location where she went missing. Mm-hmm. This is 1941, so getting around is nowhere near as easy as it is today.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, they've dealt with all these witnesses coming forward saying like, we've heard her calling on the side of the road, blah, blah, blah. So the weekend after she goes missing, they're on like day 5 or something, and they're really losing hope at this point. Like the father comes back. He has, he's sort of like been injured. He's sort of losing hope. They're kind of getting to the point where they may end up sort of wrapping up the search. Somebody puts out a call to his coworkers and friends down in Lowell, Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. 1,500 people, 1,500 people show up that weekend from Lowell to execute a ground search. 1,500 people. They said that there was 6,000 vehicles in the area between people helping with searching and onlookers. Mm-hmm. Right? There's an awesome newsreel, Paramount News Services. You ever see those like they have like the harp music and they've got the horns and it's sort of like the music you see when they're marching off to war.
Right.
Like there's this Paramount News reel that just covers it, and it's like 2 minutes worth of footage of them ground searching. You can see they're doing a grid search. They've all got their raincoats and boots on. I'm going to send you the video. Like you'll be blown away by this. Sure.
Guided by who? Who was sort of operating the
it doesn't
effort?
say. It doesn't say. I don't know who's organizing it. Wasn't able to figure that out. Okay. It seemed like it was. I'm sure that like local law enforcement was helping to organize it, but you got 1,500 people that show up to do a grid search. I've got a feeling that it was just like there was some organization there, but it was probably chaos.
So 41. I mean, Fish and Game started when? They must have been involved. I mean, if you think about Joe Dodge, he was a post-World War II character, if I remember correctly. So, I forget when Fish and Game was incorporated.
I feel like in episode 4, you did a history around like when they really got involved. Yeah. And there was like a specific case that triggered it, but I can't remember. Yeah. But anyway, so that weekend, you got 1,500 people from Lowell show up. They still don't find her. So fast forward to the Monday. They go through the search all day on Monday. People from Lowell are still around there. Finally, they make their way about 2 miles away from White Ledge. And the way they described the location is they said that they were near the junction of Middle Sister Trail. So if you're in Chocorua, if you go up Carter Ledge Trail, and then you want to get back to White Ledge Campground, you can do a loop from White Ledge. So basically go up Carter Ledge and then come back down Middle Sister Trail. So Middle Sister sort of comes off the backside of Chocorua and loops around back into the White Ledge Campground area. And then apparently there's an abandoned trail. It was listed in the 1936 AMC guide as Hobbs Brook Trail. Right. The last I could figure out, I found a little bit of chatter online that I guess this trail was closed in like 1955, but that may be a little adventure for us, Stomp, to go looking for Hobbs Brook Trail off the side of Chocorua. But apparently they found her. 2 guys were looking. They heard a little voice, and they come up to a little brook, a little lake area, and out pops this little girl. And they're like, "Are you Pamela?" And she's like, "I am." So 5-year-old girl, she had been in a little like a little indent inside like a tree area or whatever. So she had basically just found a little spot to lay down, covered herself out with leaves, was able to drink from the brook. She hadn't eaten anything in the entire time that she was out. So she lost about 8 pounds, had pretty severe frostbite on her feet. But otherwise, she was afraid that her parents were going to yell at her because she lost her blue ribbons that were in her hair. So she was nervous that her mom and dad were going to get upset.
What a doll, huh? That's amazing.
Total doll.
That's a miracle, really.
Yeah, 8 days in that area, and in 20-degree weather overnight.
Did she say anything else? Are there any other quotes from her?
Yep, I have them right here. So she said, I slept in a little hole that I filled up with some leaves, and I had to crawl out when I wanted some water and drink from the brook. And when I got hungry, I just crawled to the brook for some more water. She said she never saw another person. She heard planes searching because they did have search planes overhead, but she wasn't able to signal them. So she ended up losing 8 pounds, which was nearly 18% of her body weight. She had cuts, bruises, and significant frostbite on her feet. They had to cut the sneakers from her feet.
Wow. Wonder if she tried yelling or anything like that.
I don't know. She said that she didn't, but the mother had said that the frostbite had turned her feet black and that they had swelled up to nearly double their normal size. And she spent a total of 19 days in the hospital before being released. Mm-hmm. They did issue reward money. It was a $500 reward, and they split it across 87 people. And they gave the 2 guys that actually found her $25 each, and then split the rest across the other people. Wow,
incredible story.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And Pamela went on. She went on to become the vice president of the American Cancer Society. She was an editorial director of the Arthritis Foundation, corporate communications director for Lane Bryant, which is a clothing store, and then vice president of creative services at the Cancer Society, and then also a communications director for the U.S. Committee for the United Nations Children's Fund. Mm-hmm. So her mother actually survived her death, unfortunately. She passed away at the age of 56 in 1996 on September 11th. She lived in Orleans, Mass. On the Cape. So she was 56 years old. She lived on the Cape and then also had a home in Sarasota, Florida, where she had just recently retired. It's quite a life.
No kidding. Incredible story.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to, there's a couple of sources that I found. So New York Times obituary, I found the missing girl videos. There's 2 of them. There's a pre and a post finding her. Those were on the, I forget, they were on like a newsreel site, so I'll add those. And then there was a Time magazine article that I used. And then most importantly, I want to give a shout out to the Useless Information podcast. They did an entire episode on this called Lost in the Mountains. Highly recommended, deeper dive than we're doing here. But I just wanted to bring this story because I had seen it posted on the Forgotten New Hampshire Facebook group like a month ago. And I was like, I got to bring this up to Stomp and then do a quick dive on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice work. That's a great story.
Yeah. And this is it's interesting. Like I think about some of the cases we've had where that kid that ended up dying, I forget his name. Was it Michael McCarthy? I forget his name, but he had died up by Wheelback. And he had actually climbed up the mountain. Yep. And, I'd read some theories about when children get lost, young children tend not to panic. They tend to just sort of find a place where they feel safe and don't move. And they don't tend to exert a lot of energy, which I think that makes sense in this situation. She didn't, she went 2 miles, but she didn't exert a lot of energy. It sounds like she landed where she was pretty early on and then conserved as much energy as she needed to survive.
Wow.
Whereas they say a little bit older, once you develop that sort of fear factor in your brain, you're more likely to keep moving and exert energy, and maybe your survival odds are a little bit lower when you get a little bit older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agreed.
So that is it, Stomp. $500 reward split across 87 people.
It still went a long ways back then.
I guess. But I just, so this is about $6 a person.
Yeah. What would that equate to?
I have no idea. We'll have to do our
the dollar was
do our influence.
Yeah, it was worth a lot more back then.
Yes, exactly. All right, so Pamela Hollingworth. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes so you can look at those old newsreels. And that guy that does the voice, his name is Gregory Abbott. Like, you'll recognize him immediately. Like, anybody that's grown up, that's of a certain age, that's seen those newsreels in school, like that voice is just it's hard coded in your mind.
That's great. Will do.
SLASR's hiking topic of the week.
All right, so that was a little history segment. So now we're on to our official segment 1 here, Stomp, which is search and rescue numbers for 2019, 2020, and 2021.
It's incredible. I took a look at your Excel sheet there, man. It's pretty comprehensive. So what are we seeing? Any interesting trends?
Well, I'll get to that in a minute, but just to set the listeners so they understand, basically what I've done, and I've actually been doing this for a few years, is I have just a sort of a spreadsheet or a database of details on search and rescue events that have happened in New Hampshire. So the numbers that I'm going to share in the show here are media reported search and rescue events. So there's a whole world of stuff that goes on that doesn't make the news, but I think that this is what I would say is sort of a representative sample. We've had like about 4 or 5 years sort of consistent data that I've kept up on. So you can kind of get some patterns and trends from this, just because essentially anything that makes a news report typically means that a conservation officer had to be activated to go out to get somebody, or volunteer search and rescue organization was involved. I think what doesn't make the news typically is walkout or situations where somebody calls 911 and says, like, I'm lost, and they're able to sort of direct people out on their own without having to activate any resources. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in that area that I just don't have any access to. The numbers I'm going to share here are based on news media reports. And I just basically take the news media report, I take down like what trail they were on, what mountain, what the date is, the age, the location or the resident of the victim, the gender information, and then I have some subjective ratings that I include, which is sort of what the category is. We've got like 6 or 8 categories, which I'll talk about. And I include like links to the news site information, and then I also have like the rating that we've talked about around shame and no shame, which is sort of a fun little way to look at things and break it down. So,
right.
So with that, Stomp, just to start off with, there's 2 ways to look at the total numbers. There is total reported events. So an event is anytime like a rescue team has to go out and save somebody, and then there's people involved in rescues. So the total reported events are always going to be a little bit lower than the people involved, because you have some rescues where there might be like 1 event, but 5 people needing a rescue. So that's why and most of the numbers I'm going to talk about, I'm going to report in terms of the people involved, not the specific events.
Okay.
So sometimes things will be inflated because if you have 5 people that like had no headlamps, it's just, there's going to be a little bit more in the numbers there. But for the last, I didn't include 2022 yet,
right,
because the year's not done, but we'll do that in September or December. But for total events, 2019, 2020, and 2021, 2019 you get 92 events, 2020 you get 92 events, and then 2021 you get 98 events. So pretty consistent.
Yep. Interesting.
And then the total people involved is also very consistent. It's 110 people in 2019, 110 people in 2020, 118 people in 2021. All right, so very consistent. So when we're talking about overall trends, a little bit of a bump in 2021, but otherwise pretty flat. Next is categories. So there are 6 categories. There is people, fatalities. There is people that experience fatigue. Then I have a category which is called loss, which is basically lumped in anybody that had navigation issues, headlamp, or just general panic about not being able to be found.
Sure.
Then there's lower leg injuries. medical issues, and then I have a miscellaneous injury, which is anything that's like an injury that's not lower leg, so head, shoulder, or other. And then the last category is reckless behavior. So the most common category is lower leg injury. So that has remained consistent from the 2019, 2020, and 2021. I've got 43 in 2019, 44 in 2020, and then 40 leg injuries in 2021.
Yeah.
The next most common category is the sort of lost, navigation, headlamp, panic situation. So from 2019, there was 32 of those events. 2020, there's 35, and then 2021, 30. So pretty consistent. Fatigue is another one that's a little bit lower, but you have like 7 in 2019, 4 in 2020, and then 11 in 2021. And I think 2021, we had a period there where it was like extreme heat, and there was a number of people that ran into fatigue issues because of that. So you saw a little bit of a spike in like August.
Okay.
Right. Miscellaneous, like head, shoulder, others are pretty all over the map. So 2019 we had 6, 2020 we had 3, and then 2021 we had 13. What I noticed about 2021 is we had a lot of slip and falls where head injuries were involved.
Yep.
Which was something that I saw sort of spike up a little bit. And then
well, that's a pretty big jump. I mean, for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but my theory is that like a lot of inexperienced hikers were around with COVID. They slipped, and they didn't just they hurt their legs, they hurt their heads. Yeah. Next category is fatalities. So fatalities, I knew you were going to ask about this. So I'll have a deeper dive on this later on in this segment. But 2019 there was 6 fatalities. 2020 there was 8 fatalities. And then 2021, there was 6 fatalities. As of today, in 2022, I'm tracking 6 fatalities. So we're pretty consistent with the numbers year over year for the last 4 years right now.
Yeah, I wish we had more data as to what happened to them medically, but that's just not privy.
I'll get to that. I can give a little bit of a little bit more detail on that later on into the segment. And then the last category, so we had death, fatigue, the loss category, which again is headlamps, panic, navigation, lower leg injuries, medical issues not resulting in fatality. So these are like, an example would be like that Keith who we had done a report on, I think last year, like he had like gallstones on trail, and then like some people have like low blood sugar or whatever. Medical issues are pretty consistent, like 6 in 2019, 5 in 2020, and then 2021 we had 7. So not as many, but you do have some medical issues. And then the last one is reckless behavior. So these are the people that are just being like, I'll give some examples in a minute, but reckless behavior. In 2019, we had 10 cases. 2020, we had 11. And then 2021, we had 11. So pretty consistent.
So does it say reckless behavior in the report or accounting?
No, so these categories I'm categorizing these based on the media reports.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Right. So these are the ones that are like, and I'll give some examples of why I call them reckless. But before I do that, just the gender situation on these ones, 23 of them involve men, 9 involve women. So men are most definitely more likely to do the reckless behavior stuff. Then when you look at the total age breakdown, under 29 years old, 23 cases, and then older people are only 9. So young men are much more likely to do the reckless stuff on trail.
PhD in duh. No,
exactly. But I pulled out some examples for you, Stomp, because I knew you were going to ask this. So my perfect example of reckless on trail is the snowbridge guy on Tux. Remember the guy that went under the snowbridge and got crushed?
Yeah. It's like a Darwin
that's an
moment.
Example. Yeah. And then another one, the lady, I don't know if you remember this one or not, but there was a lady who had a Vision Quest moment on Monadnock where she was like Instagramming live on Monadnock.
I remember that one.
As the sun was setting, and she's like, I don't have a headlamp. I don't know how I'm going to get down there. And she ended up like getting lost in the dark, fell off a cliff, had to be like hospital, she had to get a helicopter, a hospital ride. So There was also another example I had that I picked out my favorite ones. The kid from Indiana that got lost near Garfield Pond with his cousins, and he was like missing from them for the entire night, and no one could explain like where he was or what happened. And I think he just got into a fight with his cousins and like slept like right off the trail or something, but they had to call a search and rescue to save him.
Yeah.
And then there was an old guy that got stuck on the Great Gulf, and he was completely in over his head, had no headlamp, no hiking experience, and they had to pick him off the Great Gulf. So those are examples of reckless behavior.
Sure.
Okay. So moving on to common months. So what do you think the most frequent months are for search and rescue events?
You know, honestly, I would guess probably October would be one of the big ones, just because of all the migrants coming to look at the leaves and stuff. But
that's right. October and August. So if I combine all 3 years worth of data, both October and August have 50 total search and rescue media reported people involved in rescues. I
find August to be interesting. Yeah, because I would think that any month really in the summer or the spring shoulder season would be particularly bad, but that's interesting.
Yeah. And then June and July. June had 44 total people involved. July had 43, followed by September and May, September had 36 and May had 35. So you have basically, it's sort of a crescendo. It starts in May, and then June and July and August are busy. You get a little bit of a dip in September, and then finish with a big bang in October.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Quietest months. Yeah, boy.
It's coming up.
Quietest months are February and December. And then January's typically quiet, but we had a weird January in 2021 where there was 11 people involved in search and rescues.
Mm-hmm. I don't quite remember the circumstances, but yeah. Yeah,
it's very odd. So moving on to some trends in age ranges. So I categorize things basically by under 29 years old, and then I've got 30 to 39, 40 to 49, and then so on and et cetera, and then 70 and older. So we have, for the last 3 years, in the age range is 136 people involved in search and rescues that are under 29, by far the largest. And then the 30 to 39 age bracket, there's 49 people involved in search and rescues. 40 to 49, 35. 50 to 59 is 46. And then 60 to 69, 51, and then 17 people over 70 years old.
What's up with the 60-year-olders?
I don't know.
That's funny. Huh.
Yep. Geographic trends? Stomp, you want to know where people are getting rescued from the most?
Sure. I have an inkling, but let's check it out.
Yeah. So across these 3 years, there's been 338 people involved in search and rescue. So Massachusetts has 100 total people. So the Mass residents are representing. They're in the lead. Followed closely by New Hampshire at 93. And then that's basically, so that's the bulk of them. So there's 338. 2/3 are Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and then the next state that is represented is Maine. There's 19 people from Maine, 17 from Rhode Island, and surprisingly, Pennsylvania and Connecticut, not Connecticut, but Pennsylvania's got 14 people, and then Connecticut's also got 14 people, and then the rest of the top 10 is rounded out by New York, New Jersey, Canada, and Vermont.
So what do you make of the spread here? So you have New Hampshire, but then the 3 surrounding states. Why would Maine and Vermont be less than Mass? Is it because they have their own mountains and they're not necessarily coming over here?
Probably, I would think so. And then also, I think you've got to look at this from the perspective of transactions. If you think of each individual hike as a transaction, my assumption is that if you look at everybody that hikes across the White Mountains in the New Hampshire region, the number of transactions being done by Massachusetts residents and New Hampshire residents is much higher, just because there's a higher population of people that are coming to the Whites from Massachusetts versus Vermont and Maine.
Gotcha.
And therefore the likelihood of
just more volume.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good point to think about when you look at this. So you've got maybe a little over 100 people per year are involved in search and rescues that get reported by the media. I don't know what the volume is. If you add everything in, it's probably a lot more. But realistically, when you compare that to the amount of people that go on hiking activities, and I don't have any solid numbers on how many hikes per year, but it has to be like in the million range, I would think. Mm-hmm. So when you think about like the percentage of people that are the number of actual hikes versus the people that have needed rescues, and you break that into a percentage, like your odds of being involved in a SAR call are pretty slim.
Right. So, unless you're on a SAR team. Then it's like, holy moly, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone matters. And one thing I need to do is I got to take a look at like the Rek-lis number. So there's 88 people that are outside of New England that were involved in search and rescues, and I got to take a look to see what percentage of, if there's any sort of trend of reckless behavior by those folks or not. So I didn't look at that yet, but anyway, Massachusetts and New Hampshire certainly represent. Mountains. So I pulled some data on the top 10 most frequently involved mountains in search and rescue. So,
okay.
The leading contender. So what I did with Lafayette and Lincoln is I just labeled that as Franconia Ridge. So any incident that happens on Old Bridle, Falling Waters, or Greenleaf, or anywhere on the ridge or those mountains, I just throw it all into Franconia Ridge, just because I think that's fair, because it's just, I don't know why I did that, but I do. So Franconia Ridge leads the way with 35 events, and then Mount Washington is second with 34. So those are definitely the hot spots, Franconia and Mount Washington, followed by Monadnock, and then Welch Dickey. So
I'm surprised
14
Welch
on
is up there.
Monadnock, and then Welch. Well, think about it. Like there's a lot of activity stopped because they had a string where they had like 3 or 4 rescues within like a 1 month period one summer. I think in 2021.
Right. Yeah. Last year was crazy up there. This year, nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I missed it. You know what I did is I put Mount Chocorua, and then I put Chocorua. So Chocora's had 17. So they're actually third place.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I was like, wait a minute, why is Chocorua at 7?
Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I gotta just fix the formatting on that, because they're actually at 17, but they're at 23. So that's right.
Oh, okay.
Franconia Ridge, Mount Washington, Chocorua, Monadnock, Welch Dickey, and then followed by Mount Jefferson.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So those are the biggest hotspots.
Jefferson.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Caps Ridge, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a weird summit too, with all the boulders. It's not very good footing up there. I wonder if that's the whole area. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. So now moving on to, this is my subjective rating, and I know that, like, you know, I've actually evolved a lot over the years. Like, I used to be like much more of a kind of a jerk about this, and I'd be like, oh, everybody basically is rated as shame. And now I don't do that. Like, I have some sort of standard rules. Like, if you get caught out without a headlamp, you're automatically going to get called a shame.
Yeah.
If you're involved in a category that's called Rek-lis, you're going to get a shame. And then that's about it. But when I look at the breakdown of the 338 people, 106 I categorized as shame. Mm-hmm. And then 212 were no shame, which basically means like you got hurt, you had a medical issue, whatever. And I make no judgments on the fatalities. That's just a separate category. It's just, there's always sad stories. But some of the greatest hits when it came to things that I rated as shame was, the couple with the kid that got lost walking around Flume Gorge and had to call 911.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's like, dude, there's nowhere they like, just turn around. There's nothing, no way you can get lost. The guy from Florida who lost his boots and only had 2 of the 10 essentials with him on Falling Waters. Right. I don't know if you remember that or not. These are just examples of what I'm marking as shame. There was 2 Instagram influencers who got lost on Whiteface, like at the very beginning of COVID, where everyone was like, stay the hell home.
Yep.
And these 2 influencers were like, basically calling 911 for a rescue because they like got lost off trail like a few feet. Then they were posting on their Instagram account about how they had like this magical transformative experience because they went hiking, and everyone's like, you failed to mention you activated a search and rescue event in the middle of COVID. So anyway, and then there was a group of grad students that got in trouble on Carter Dome on the Black Angel Trail, completely unprepared and, in over their head. So that's the type of example of like the shame stuff that we put in there.
Gotcha.
So you can put your shame drop in stuff.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right. So last thing here, and then we'll do closing thoughts so the fatalities, again, there's across 2019, 2020, and 2021, there's been 20 total fatalities. So there was 6 in 2019, 8 in 2020, and 6 in 2021. So the majority of these are due to medical issues on trail. So there was 10 incidents that were labeled on the press releases as medical incidents. So we don't know for sure what these are. We can presume that, most likely you're talking about heart attacks, strokes, maybe aneurysms. So that is sort of half of the cases there that we're sort of putting up to the assumption is that they're in that category. And then there were 2 cases of hypothermia. There were 3 what we're calling climbing accidents. Then there was 2 avalanche, and then 3 accidental falls. So there was a case of an accidental fall in Cannon. There was a gentleman that had been struck by a tree. He had his hammock set up and a tree fell on him. Mm-hmm. And then I think that there was a person that had fallen off a cathedral ledge, and they don't know whether or not that was a slip and fall or an intentional suicide. But, those are the sort of that's how the fatalities are broken down. Mm-hmm. 18 men, 2 women.
There you go.
So there you go. 9 of them were over 60. There was 5 in their 50s. 6 were in their 40s, and then no one under 30. So the youngest was 32 years old. And of the medical events, 4 of the people were under the age of 60. And then, like I said, in 2022, we've currently seen 6 fatalities.
Yep. Do you know the ages of those people?
In 2022?
Yeah.
I don't. I'll have to pull those up. We'll talk about that in December.
Again. Sounds good.
So, Stomp, my closing thoughts on this is that the numbers are pretty consistent.
Yeah, it seems it. Couple
headlamps and navigation issues along with lower leg injuries seem to be the most common issues. And then, as I said before, rescues overall are pretty rare, but we should all be prepared, and we should all ideally be carrying things with us that could potentially help somebody that's in trouble, because you're probably just as likely to run into somebody that's getting into trouble that you'll need to help out than you are having to need a rescue yourself.
Yeah. And guys are risk takers, especially young guys.
Yeah. Young guys definitely take more risk. And I got to scrub the data a little bit. I got to clean up that Mount Chocorua thing, and I'm going to take the names off. But I will post a link to the SLASR website where you can take a look at this data if you want. I'm happy to share it with anybody. And again, just a reminder that this is media news reported events, so this is not all-encompassing about what search and rescue does. There's a lot more that goes on that we're not privy to. This is simply what they put out in news reports.
Yeah, let's start with the national stuff.
Yeah, we've been holding off on this for a while. So
I just saw this the other day, and I couldn't believe it. Did you read the story yet?
I haven't yet, so I'm going to read this live. So this is a hiker that's lost in a Colorado forest, and he was overlooked by the helicopter rescue crew looking for him because they mistook his waving for help is just saying hello. I always say hello to helicopters too. I got to stop doing that. I get so excited when I see them.
Yeah, but I know, but what was the helicopter crew thinking? And like, wouldn't you be curious? I don't know. I'm curious what the protocols are for that type of situation. But I thought that was really funny.
That's funny. So this is a group in Colorado. They called 911 on September 8th after one of the members didn't return to the camp the night before. So helicopter crews are out looking for this guy. They started a ground search as well. Ultimately, the Black Hawk helicopter spotted someone they thought could be the missing hiker. Then they flew right on by. So he didn't seem super excited to see the rescuer. So you want to be super excited. And he didn't completely match the description given to the searchers. And he just didn't seem frantic enough. So you really want to go full Gilligan's Island here.
Oh, totally.
You need to go nuts. Yeah. I guess the pack color that they gave wasn't the same. And when the pilot looked down, he saw someone that kind of matched the description. But the man, I guess, backed off. He looked lackadaisical. He was probably exhausted. Mm-hmm. And the pilot was like, okay, he looks fine. So then they flew off. He just didn't seem in distress. So experts say that this incident is proof that if you're lost or need help and a plane is in sight, look alive out there. So wake up, fellas.
Yeah, don't do the Queen's
Make it very
wave.
clear that you need help. Yep. So
hello.
I guess in this case, yeah, exactly. Potential tragedy was averted. Searchers on the ground found the man and brought him to safety. So he was tired, dehydrated, and cold, but not seriously injured. And I guess the dude made a couple of smart moves. He stayed in one place to avoid danger, and then he moved out into the open so rescuers could find him in the morning. So good for him, and that's a good lesson. So if you see a helicopter, again, full Gilligan's Island, wave those arms, go nuts, and make sure they know that you are looking for them too.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Okay, now we are going to Scottsdale, Arizona, out west.
Busy.
Matter of fact, I was looking, so Tasha, who we had on a few weeks ago, her and Dan did the Sedona up to the Grand Canyon and Page, Arizona, and that whole area trip. Well, I was looking at their pictures, awesome area.
Yeah.
If you're ever looking for an idea for a trip, Sedona, go up to Flagstaff, go to Page, go check out Glen Canyon Dam, go check out the Grand Canyon. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this next story is in Scottsdale, Arizona. So a drone was heralded as a critical instrument used to rescue a distressed hiker in Scottsdale.
Yeah. So
according to a release by the Scottsdale Fire Department, paramedics piloted the drone for about 10 minutes after an incident was reported. They were looking to locate a woman in her 60s that was off-trail on a UTV, which I think is one of those sort of sit-down off-road vehicles. So they have 6 drones capable of flying 400 feet in a radius of 5 miles away from the pilot's location.
Mm-hmm. Pretty
the
advanced.
drone was flown about 2 miles. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, these guys are really ahead of it.
Yeah, so they were able to find her, and I guess this woman was off trail. She was treated on the on the mountain and refused transport to the hospital. So I guess in addition to this lady, they had performed like 2 additional rescues. You know, those UTVs and like those off trail, like you could like fly off trail and just disappear. I mean, maybe it's a little bit different in the desert, mm-hmm. but it's still like those things are so powerful and it's so dangerous. Like if you flip or something, like you could get killed.
Right. You see the picture there with the giant knobby wheel. I'm pretty sure that's one of the alternate wheels that you can put below a litter. They do have wider ones like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like that's a litter next to it as well. But that wouldn't work out here. But that's meant for sandier surfaces. Very interesting. Yeah. But it's a neat thing. It also says that the drones can deliver water, flashlights, and other life-saving materials to people who are distressed and in need of rescue. So Arizona's like really killing it with the drone capabilities here.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense that they would have that as a common tool because there's like not a lot of tree cover, so they can just really get way up above and just sort of if they can cover 5 mile radius, like they can just really cover looking down on in a wide area very quickly.
Yeah. Well,
and with the heat out there, like time is of the essence.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're moving on to Russia. Stomp, you picked this story on purpose because I'm going to screw up the pronunciation here. But in Russia, 8 people have died climbing the Kalushevskaya Sopka volcano.
Good job, Conrad.
You should isolate that vocal. We'll drop that in somewhere. Kalushevskaya Sopska volcano in Russia's far east. Interfax news agency quoted a local official as saying, after freezing winds halted a rescue attempt. So earlier, local authorities said 6 people had been killed and 6 more were believed to be stranded from a party of 12, including 2 guides, but 2 more people died, according to Roman Veseletsky. Mm-hmm. He is the Kamchatka Territory Deputy Prime Minister. His information came from a guide who was communicating from the volcano by satellite phone. So apparently they looked to climb this 16,000-foot volcano on Tuesday, but they ran into trouble on Saturday when some of the group fell to their death at almost 4,200 meters. So they're probably around 14,000 feet there.
Wow, what a disaster.
One person is thought to have a broken leg. Yeah.
Yeah, high winds.
Looks like a mess.
67 miles an hour, 7-degree temps, Fahrenheit. Wow.
Yeah. What a mess. It doesn't really give a lot of details, but it sounds like they might have had like some kind of a rope accident or something. Mm-hmm. What a mess. Russia. So I did enjoy trying to get my my pronunciations going there, though.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Interesting fact, though. It's like this one volcano is the tallest of over 160 volcanoes in this area. It's a peninsula in Russia. It's like, wow, who knew?
Yeah, I don't think about like volcanoes in Russia, but I guess Russia's a very big place. So,
Yep.
All right, so stop me if you heard this one before. Hiker is stuck on a 300-foot cliff, and he tells 911 he can't go up or down. Wow. Oregon. This happened in Oregon.
Yeah.
So, they have the drone footage of him. Look at him. He's like, I bet you're wondering how I ended up here. So,
it's genius.
Oh my God.
It
looks like he can just climb up.
That's like the knife's edge. Like if you were to isolate Maine, Katahdin's knife's edge, dump it on top of an ocean front. Wow, that's crazy. There he is. He's just sort of sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see him.
Oh my goodness.
The drone's got him. Now he's like,
Here's the negative of the drones, yeah.
Oh boy.
So 41-year-old.
Yeah, the guy is just on top of there. He's just like embarrassed. So
he was stuck on the barren 300-foot cliff nearly 200 feet below the rescuers who'd made their way to the top near Lone Branch Beach in Brookings. Interesting. They risked their lives to get him. So a rescuer had to rappel down, and then they both descended to the beach. The rescue took 5 hours. Crazy. It's very similar to that Eagle Crag story, I suppose.
That's what I was thinking about when I saw that. It was just funny to see. It's amazing that they have drone footage of this guy in Oregon just like sitting there like, I don't know what to do.
Help.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess he did the right thing under the circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so this next one is hikers witness woman fall.
900 feet. Oh, she fell 900 feet from below the summit of Capitol Peak in Pitkin County. So this is occurring in Colorado. It's 14,000 footer. It's one of the most difficult mountains to climb with extreme exposure and loose crumbling rock. Just before 8 a.m., a witness contacted emergency services, reported that a rock that the victim was trying to grab onto gave way. You still there, Mike?
I'm there, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just the link to the article just crashed my machine.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry about that. It's
no worries.
Probably a Russian hacker.
Could be. That's right. I read that Russian article and now my computer.
So they initially estimated that the woman fell 1,500 feet to 2,000 feet, and ultimately it was approximately 900 feet. That's terrible.
Do you, when you, I don't know, this is depressing, but you fall 1,000 feet or something like that, do you, I've heard this before, do you die of a heart attack before you hit the ground, or do you, or is it?
I don't know. I don't know if anybody has survived to tell the story, but that's can you imagine? Oh my goodness, that's so horrible.
I don't want to think about it.
So they had to do a recovery mission, which, as you can tell, on a 14,000-foot mountain is not easy. They found the body at 2:47 p.m., and they flew the body out to a lower camp several miles below elevation. And that's all. And again, this is why I will never climb. It's the old airline analogy. No, thank you.
Yeah, I have no interest in doing that either. It freaks me out.
Oh, totally.
All right, so Stomp, this is the story you have been, so we're moving to local. This is the story that Stomp has been so excited about. He was like, So Stomp sometimes, like, he'll send me, like, anytime he gets excited with something over text, like he'll start with dude and like an exclamation point. And then I'm always waiting for like, oh my God, he's got some really good scoop about one of our friends or something. And then he's like, read this story. So a Durham beaver gets a second chance thanks to first responders. So there was a search and rescue for a beaver in Durham, New Hampshire. So a UNH student, Johnny on the stick here, called Fish and Game today to report that a beaver was stuck in the outflow inlet at the Durham Reservoir. So the unlucky beaver was at the bottom, 15 feet down, with only one way to get out, and appeared to have been trapped for some time. So conservation officers called on the Durham Fire Department for assistance to bring the water levels up so the beaver could use a 75-foot culvert to exit on the other side of the dam. So water levels are super low. So I think this thing just got caught in the drainage area. So the fire department jumped into action and brought the water levels up, and the beaver entered the culvert. The only problem was that it didn't want to leave. So the first responders improvised and tied an ugly mess of things that float and sent it through the pipe with a charge of pumped water to force it out the other side. Wasn't a quick process, but it worked. So special thanks to the men and women of the Durham Fire Department. Thumbs up to the conservation officer and the UNH student that notified them. So very cool story.
It is, yeah. And it caught my attention because the first thing that came to mind is, wait a minute, they'll rescue a beaver but not a dog on trail. But then I thought about it more and I'm like, okay, logistically it was probably much easier, this and that, and the animals such as a beaver are just naturally in these habitats, so it's within the jurisdiction of Fish and Game, whereas dogs not necessarily aren't. But it was interesting.
Yeah, it's cool, and I got a little bit of experience with beavers at the place up in Maine. So we had, for a couple of years, we had a lodge in the back corner of the pond. So the pond, there's only like 5 or 6 houses on this pond. It's it's a good sized pond, but it's basically like 5-10 minutes to get from one side to the other. So it's not that big. And we had a big lodge set up on the back corner where there's no houses, and you'd see the beaver pop up every once in a while. And then I think they call them kits. I think that's what they call their babies. So we ran into some issues a couple of years ago because I think much like, I think bears get kicked out of the den when they're like their second year, I believe. They get kicked out, and then there's a lot of trouble with those young bears running around. But the same thing happens with beavers, is that the young beavers get kicked out of the lodge, and then they've got to go off and find their own territory and their own sort of breeding situation. So we have a little dock that we swim out to and all this stuff. And I remember it was probably like 3 summers ago, for a good 2-week period, we had a problem because the juvenile beaver kept like swimming around, like it wouldn't leave the lodge. It kept trying to get back in, and they kept kicking it out. And it would show up every morning. So the kids like to swim out to the dock in the summer, but they wouldn't do it because this beaver was floating around. And then the other beaver would come and like chase the beaver away and stuff. So it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's very common for beavers to attack humans, but I definitely read an article a while back where somebody got attacked pretty severely by a beaver in Minnesota. They were swimming and the beaver got to them. So not to be messed with.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, we have a whole bunch of rescues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Blueberry Mountain.
September.
Yeah, it's getting busy.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get this one. So on September 10th, Fish and Game received a call for an injured hiker on Blueberry Mountain Trail in Benton. So 55-year-old hiker from Vermont was hiking Blueberry Mountain with her husband when she suffered a leg injury, which prevented her from being able to hike down. So conservation officers, Pemi Valley Search and Rescue, and Upper Valley Wilderness Response all responded to the trail. So they were able to get an ATV to drive up about a mile or so, which makes sense. I think Benton Trail, they can get people up there. And then she was placed in a litter and carried down the trail to the waiting ATV and driven back to the trailhead. So call came in around 2 o'clock. They were able to get her to the trailhead by 5:40. So that's not a bad result there. So Blueberry Mountain this is the mountain across from Glen Cliff Trail if you're going to go hike Moosilauke.
Right, yeah.
Via Glen Cliff, like Blueberry is down the street a little ways, and then you can pretty easily drive down that road, and then I think you can drive up the initial part of that hiking trail. There might be rocks like in front of there, but I'm sure they can get around them in the ATV. So that's not a bad place to take an ATV.
Yeah, and that person was very lucky because there were 100 SAR volunteers training at Cannon that day. So captive audience, so everybody just sort of packed up and went.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's like, hey, we
she was like, what?
It happens.
Why is it 500 people here?
It happens. Like, hey, whenever we do a training or a hike, a qualifying hike, inevitably there's a call. It's funny.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so then we got another one. And Blueberry Mountain, that's a good, if you're just getting into hiking, or you just you want like a nice easy hike for like the 52 with the views, or you want a good fall hike with the kids, like that's a great mountain. It gets a little like, I get a little confused up top on the peak there, but overall it's a pretty easy mountain to kind of manage. So anyway, hikers rescued in separate events. So we will start on September 11th. New Hampshire Fish and Game was notified of a hiker who was suffering from severe dehydration symptoms near the summit of Mount Osceola. So this was a 72-year-old hiker from Connecticut, and she was unable to continue descending the trailhead to Tripoli Road. So rescuers from Pemi Valley Search and Rescue, as well as conservation officers, were able to respond to assist. So she was helped by some passing Good Samaritan hikers who provided rehydration to her, and she was able to begin hiking again without assistance. The majority of the rescuers were diverted to a subsequent rescue that was beginning for an injured hiker on the Gorge Brook Trail in Mount Moosilauke in Benton. So two members of Pemi Valley were able to meet this hiker on the trail at 3:41, and they hiked down the remaining mile with her to the trailhead, so they were able to arrive without further incident at 4:32. So that's not bad. She was dehydrated. She made it in a little over a mile in 50 minutes. So all good. And then around the same time at 4:50, there was an injured hiker that was reported on the Falling Waters Trail in Lincoln. So this was a 59-year-old hiker from New Hampshire. She fell and sustained a serious injury to her upper leg. So volunteers from Pemi Valley Search and Rescue, as well as conservation officers, responded to provide assistance. So rescue party reached her. Oh, this is quick. So she called at 4:50. Rescue party reached her at 5:30 to provide medical treatment, and then they transported her down. It was less than a half a mile down the trail. So she got injured pretty close to the trailhead, which is good.
Right. So listeners should know, I mean, this is worth talking about because it's actually really funny. At 2 o'clock, I left for Rek-lis. So this is the Rek-lis 100K celebration day, and you actually referenced it, Mike, during your comedy monologue about me not taking calls. You'd never forgive me and this and that. So wouldn't you know it, the second I leave for the show, like within 5 minutes, 2 calls come in, and then there's a third. It was just, head-slapping moment. Like, are you kidding me? But
You missed all the action stuff.
Yeah, it was like FOMO for sure, but it for me, it reinforced the fact that we are all volunteers and we cannot do this 100% of the time. You do what you can, and you help out as much as you can, and everybody is appreciated for it, and everybody deserves a day off. I mean, I think it's important for rescuers and EMT people and, first responders to have that outlet or whatever, your hobby, just to be healthy and normal. And, you cannot live this stuff 24/7. It'll kill you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then just moving on, like the third one that you were talking about on September 11th, Fish and Game received a 911 call at 2:00. There was an injured hiker on the Gorge Brook Trail on Mount Moosilauke in Benton. From now on, when I talk about Moosilauke, I'm gonna switch it up and say Moosilauke and then Moosilauke, so that way I can't get any garbage from anyone because I say it both ways.
Clever.
So hiker was a 33-year-old from Massachusetts. She was hiking the Ridge Loop on Mount Moosilauke alone when she suffered a lower leg injury that prevented her from being able to hike down the mountain. So PEMI Search and Rescue responded along with conservation officers. She was about 3 miles up the Gorge Brook Trail from the nearest road. So rescuers hiked up to her to reach around 4:00. And then once there, they were able to carry her down the Gorge Brook Trail, arriving at Dartmouth College Ravine Lodge around 7:50. So this was a long one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah. So you got busy. Kind of a little bit of a walkout on Franconia, and then you've got the other walkout on Osceola, and then this was where the real heavy-duty stuff was going on.
Right. Yeah, many members were diverted to the longer one. Smart call.
Yeah. Hey, I got a question for you. On Moosilauke, do you have an opinion on like going up Gorge Brook versus Carriage Road, like doing that loop from the lodge? Like, you make a recommendation one way or the other?
No, not really. No,
it's a pick 'em.
Yeah, I don't have enough exposure to Carriage to know it fully. Gorge versus say Beaver Brook, yeah, but Carriage, no. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I've done, like, I went up Carriage and then we hit the South Peak first and then went over to the main peak and then down. So I've done it like clockwise, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Twice I've done it clockwise. So I don't know. I guess it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, not really sure. Add it to the list.
Here's one you don't hear. Add it to the list. I'm going to go the other way and see. So here's one you don't hear about a lot. So around 4:45 on Thursday, September 15th, Fish and Game was notified of a hiker that suffered a lower leg injury while descending Mount Sunapee. I've never thought to hike Mount Sunapee.
I think Sunapee is on the 500 list.
Is it?
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Check that out. So 20-year-old hiker from Revere had prepared to go on a solo hike starting from Mountain Road in Newbury, ascending the Andrew Brook Trail to Lake Solitude. So she had made it to the lake, taken a rest before returning in the same trail. She slipped and fell, injured her leg, and she had to call 911. So I guess it was about a little over a mile from the trailhead. So they arrived at the lot around 7:10. So 4:45 she called, and she's back at the trailhead by 7:10. So not horrible.
Yeah, not too bad. But you're right. Yep. Interesting location.
Yep. And then sticking with the southwest part of the state here, we go to Mount Monadnock. We've got a young gentleman from Rhode Island who slipped while descending the White Cross Trail and suffered a lower leg injury. So, actually it's a female, sorry, 21-year-old female. She was unable to make it down to the base without assistance. So they've got a nice ranger station down there in the bottom of the trailhead, so they were able to provide medical assistance and stabilized her injury while awaiting some other rescuers to initiate a carryout. So she was placed in a litter and carried a distance of about 1.5 miles to the trailhead to the park headquarters. And I guess shout out to Upper Valley Wilderness Response Team, Fish and Game, and the Mountain Patrol Rangers, as well as Jaffrey, New Ipswich, Ringe, and Peterborough Fire Departments. So call came in around 3:45, and they made it out to the trailhead around 8:15. So you're talking 5 hours. Mm-hmm. So, and then here we go. So during the carryout, a Good Samaritan assisting with the rescue also slipped. So, and this sucks. Like, you're a good Samaritan, and they put your name in the press release. But anyway, 25-year-old from Boston, Mass, suffered an ankle injury, so they had to do a second carryout to bring this person to park headquarters. So overall, approximately 40 rescuers took part in both carryouts. So that must explain why the other one took till 8:15. So
yeah, I don't know the circumstances around this one, but it points to the need for training and experience, and that's the role of the volunteer search and rescue teams. It could happen to anybody, but for those just jumping on to a mission like that, I would think there's a greater risk of injury just because of the inexperience and whatnot.
Yeah. And I would think it's like the same thing about hiking. Like, I'll take like my friends that don't go hiking, and like they're just not used to sort of navigating on rocks and roots and uphill and downhill, and like you do it over and over again, and you get that repetition, and you don't even think twice about like, okay, I just have to pick my footing. I have to imagine when you add a litter, or you're adding like
so foreign, dude.
Multiple people on a narrow trail. It's a completely different way of like placing your feet, and like it becomes natural the way when you do it dozens of times, but it's not natural for a newbie.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. And then our last one here is a hunter injured in a tree stand accident. So this is, why did you put this on here? This isn't hiking related.
Well, it's
interesting.
It's fishing game related. It's in the whites, and it's just an odd story. You just don't hear about these things. So I figured I'd throw it in there. Have you ever seen a tree stand?
I have. Matter of fact, I run in my local town forest, and there's a tree. There's like the most illegal tree stand ever. Like in our Amesbury woods, like there's a guy that has a tree stand, but I'm like, it's on Amesbury's like public property, and it's like right on a main trail where people hike. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But I have seen like the tree stands up there. I've never seen the guy on it. But I'm like, this can't be legal.
I've come across several bushwhacking, and some of them can be 15 feet high. I mean, they're up there. But it's just a little unusual. It's like Katniss. Yeah. Katniss from
exactly.
Hunger Games.
Exactly. Right. But this one happened in Goffstown. So 58-year-old gentleman from Goffstown had been setting up his tree stand in the woods. He began ascending the tree stand after securing the lower straps, and the stand shifted and began to fall over. So this guy took a dive from the tree stand and sustained serious but non-life-threatening injuries. So he was able to call a friend who called 911, and then Goffstown Police and Fire and Rescue were able to assist the guy out of the woods. So Fish and Game would like to remind hunters to always practice safe setup, use, and removal of tree stands. Most tree stand accidents can be avoided by using the buddy system to put up and remove, as well as by utilizing a safety harness while hunting. So who knew?
Yeah.
Find a buddy.
I guess. Yeah. Yep. If this was like just building a tree fort, would have been fine.
Yeah. And I get it. Like some people hunt definitely like for the meat, and they want to store up over the winter. But like for me, like it's got to be the most boring activity ever.
Oh yeah. Patience, absolute patience.
Like I just don't have the patience for it. So kudos to those hunters.
Yeah. You ever build a tree fort when you were a kid?
Sure did. We had a tree fort in my house in North Reading.
It's so much fun. Good times.
Matter of fact, I was explaining to my kids, like one thing that I always go on these rants about, like when I was growing up, like there's certain things that like we experience that they don't experience now. Like when I was a kid growing up, there was like packs of wild dogs that were roaming the neighborhood off leash. You just had to like avoid those, right?
Right.
Right? It was just like, that was just a fact of life. Like I was a paper boy, and you just had to avoid certain dogs, and there'd be packs of dogs, and you just learned to avoid them. And the same thing with bullies. Like every neighborhood had like at least a bunch of bullies, and like you could get beat up. And then like there was tree houses. But the thing about our tree house I remember is back in the 80s, and I'm going to start saying this a lot. Remember when we had gypsy moths?
Oh, sure.
And I don't think you're allowed to call them that anymore, but I don't know what they're called anymore, but they used to be called gypsy moths. Yep. And we had these infestations. Remember you would put like the tinfoil on on the trees to make sure that the gypsy moth. Although you lived in Lynn, so you may not understand.
I remember it up north though when we would go up.
Yeah, exactly. So you put the tinfoil around trees so the gypsy moths wouldn't climb on it. But we had a tree fort in my backyard that we built. My father mostly built it, but we built it too. But it got infested with like those gypsy moth webs and stuff, so we couldn't go in it for a while. But yeah, we would have our clubhouse and all that.
Yeah,
it was fun.
That's great. Good memories. Different time, different age, but
yep. Yeah, well, this short show went a little bit long, Stomp, so I think we're going to call it a night.
Yeah, let's do that. And next week, maybe we'll touch upon shoulder season. We're a little deeper into it, and we'll get it going.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, later.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about the topics covered in today's show, please check out the show notes and safety information at SLASRpodcast.com. That's SLASR podcast.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next week for another great show. Until then, on behalf of Mike and Stomp, get out there and crush some mega peaks.
Now covered in scratches, blisters, and bug bites, Chris Staff wanted to complete his most challenging day hike ever.
Fish and Game officers say the hiker from Florida activated an emergency beacon yesterday morning. He was hiking along the Appalachian Trail when the weather started to get worse. Officials say the snow was piled up to 3 feet in some spots, and there was a wind chill of -1 degree.
And there's 3 words to describe this race. Do we all know what they are?
Here's Lieutenant James Nealon, New Hampshire Fish and Game. Lieutenant, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make when they're heading out on the trails to hike here in New Hampshire?
It seems to me the most common is being unprepared. I think if they just simply visited hikesafe.com and got a list of the 10 essential items and had those in their packs, they probably would have no need to ever call us at all.